Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Trends. I'm Dawn, Content and Communications Lead of Lion Global Investors. Thank you so much for being with us here today. In this series, I will be chatting with investment professionals and industry experts to discuss market insights and trending topics in a casual and lighthearted manner. This podcast also aims to provide investing tips and actionable ideas for beginners looking to dip their toes into the world of finance. Joining us on this episode is Ong Ai Ling, Head of Artificial Intelligence of Investments, AIOI, here at Lion Global Investors. To set the stage broadly and simply speaking, artificial intelligence, or AI, refers to the use of machines to replicate human intelligence, while machine learning, ML, is a subset of AI to reflect the evolution of that. We are now at the heart of technological revolution. AI is everywhere in our daily lives, being used across all industries, from your daily Hey Siri on Apple devices to wearable watches in beauty, fitness, finance, art, you name it. As a leading fund management house, we believe that applying artificial intelligence, in particular machine learning, to investment management is indeed the next frontier. To that end, we've invested resources and capabilities in this area. We have set up a dedicated AI team who's led by Ling, who has more than 16 years of investment experience and also currently the portfolio manager for our Lion Global Disruptive Innovation Fund that invests in disruptive themes like AI, EV, gene therapy, and the likes. So this episode is going to be the first of many mini episodes on AIOI because we have so much ground to cover. In each episode, we will delve more in depth into the different aspects of AI in investing, about deep learning, about machine learning, all these big words. What exactly do they mean? How are they evolving? And what does it actually mean to you and me? So Ling, welcome to the episode once again. The last episode we had you on the metaverse was a huge hit. So I'm super excited to have you here again with us and many more episodes to come.
Thank you, Dawn. It's really exciting to be here again with you.
So there's so much innovation that's happening in the sector, clearly increasing adoption and applications of AI. So before we dig deep into this world of artificial intelligence, of investments, what's on the horizon, so please share some background about yourself and what led you to set up the AIOI team at LGI.
Sure. So I was very fortunate. I started my investing career about 16 years ago. And I started in London and then in Hong Kong. And I had the opportunity then to work at some of the world's most sophisticated multinational hedge funds and alternative asset managers in our industry. And during that time, I got exposed to a very wide spectrum of investment strategies. So it's an entire spectrum from the more very quantitative focus, risk arbitrage, statistical arbitrage style, where we rely quite heavily on quantitative modeling to come and decide our risk reward, our position sizing, all these kind of issues, to the slightly much more fundamental style where we rely on what we call our innate human investment acumen to make decisions about which companies do we want to buy, what do we think the market's looking like, do we go long or short, right?
Yeah.
And different funds use different styles. Some funds will be more human touch, where we evaluate the data using human touch, and some funds rely more on quantitative models where we crunch the data to create what we call trading signals. But one thing that I notice, a common thread tying all these hedge fund styles, is that we consume a very large amount of data to create that investment advantage. So when I joined Lion Global, roughly about 5 years ago now, I leveraged this prior hedge fund experience and developed what I consider sort of a more hybrid style towards my portfolio management, where I use my market knowledge and my market expertise to imagine and to visualize how I think a company would develop, whether it's positively or negatively in a long term, from a long-term basis, and from a purely sort of more fundamental basis. Whilst at the same time, when I'm doing the shorter term, more tactical trading strategies, I rely on a lot of copious amounts of market data, which I will then evaluate and crunch with spreadsheets and VBA macros. So traditionally, I'd do that myself. I'll code up the macros and the spreadsheets myself. But a couple of years ago, when I took over the management of Lion Global's, our first smart beta product, which is our Global Disruptive Innovation Fund, that's when I was given the opportunity and the mandate to hire a few data scientists to showcase how we can adopt a much more systematic approach in which we do this data analysis, because our industry relies a lot on data and information, right? And how we can leverage and utilize some of these more sophisticated, advanced data crunching techniques that come from the fields of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So in that sense, setting up AIOI is really realizing a vision that I've had since my very early days in this industry, where we can harness that computing power to crunch the data, whilst at the same time freeing the human brains, like humans like me, leave our human brains to be more creative, to think. That's right, to actually use it to think creatively, right? And curate the companies and the data sets, the companies that go into the universe, think and curate like the data sets that we use, because in computing terms, we have this term called garbage in, garbage out. So we think about, is it going to be garbage that goes in or not, right? So that's much more a human thing to think about stuff. And also, I think, we mentioned briefly, one of the strong motivation for me to set up AIOI is to actually bring some of these much more sophisticated hedge fund investment techniques, which historically tended to be reserved kind of exclusively for the ultra high net worth individuals, because your check size is quite big and they have a lot of thresholds you can't get in. And now I want to bring these techniques to the retail asset management industry for our local retail investors, because technology is constantly evolving and we have to advance with the times.
Yeah, indeed. I think that is super cool. It's a really cool career history. So now you've mentioned you coded when you were young. Now you work with a whole group of data scientists. So out of curiosity, were you always a computer geek? Because I know you did graduate from Cambridge with a law degree. So why the switch? Tell us more.
Yes, so I am a bit of a contradiction. So when I was at university, I was one of the very few law students who can probably code as proficiently as I can draft a contract. And I actually started coding when I was about 10 years old. Wow. I was a bit of a geek back then. I was in the computing club through my primary school years, through my secondary school years, and then even in JC, I was in a computing club. So actually,
that's your calling. That's your calling.
It is in a way. Being an Asian family, we were like, I'll be a lawyer. So I was like, my dad was like, if you don't want to be a lawyer, you can always go learn computer science. But I was like, well, I'll go study law. It's fine. So when I quit law to go into finance, I was actually, ironically, again, a contradiction, because I was one of the few investors who could read the contracts that we were signing and draft them as proficiently as I could. Code up our VBA and our APIs.
So that's really cool. We use, terms like, artificial intelligence that we mentioned, machine learning, very interchangeably. I mentioned it slightly in introduction, but of course, I want to get your thoughts on it, right? So would you mind just taking a moment to explain to our audience kind of the differences between all these terms?
Sure, yes. And I totally understand this world and field of artificial intelligence can be very confusing to the lay person, right? So let me try and make it as simple as possible. In a very simple sense, so artificial intelligence or AI refers to the whole field, the entire spectrum of all using machine algorithms or codes to make the decision, so that the machine can make a decision without the need for constant human supervision. So in a simplest sense, it would be like a computer program that tells the machine, if this, then that. So if you see this, do that. It doesn't teach the machine to think for itself, but it does approximate a very basic level of human intelligence. So I have 2 kids. So for example, I would tell my child, if you see a green man at the road sign, then you can cross.
Right.
If you see a red man, You stand there and wait.
Right.
Ta-da!
Right. So it's instructional. It's instructional.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And then machine learning is a term that is a subset within AI.
Yeah.
And what it aims to do, or what it refers to, is the aim or the goal to have the machine learn and improve by giving it a set of data and then have the machine figure out its own rules.
Okay.
Using the kid example again.
Okay.
So you imagine if every time you have a baby that cries, so I'll give him a candy to stop him from crying. So I don't need to tell the baby that I'm giving you a candy or the reward to stop you from crying. After a few times of doing that, the baby gets it, right?
Yeah.
So effectively, you have a few sample, what in data science terms we call sample data points.
Yes.
And the baby, i.e. the machine, figures out what it needs to do to get its reward, which is the candy.
Yes.
So what do you think it'll do? It will sometimes learn that if I cry, I will get a candy.
Right.
Even though I'm trying to teach it that if you stop crying, you'll
Right.
get the candy.
Right. So the very word learning, right?
Yes,
Machine
it learns
learning.
something.
Okay.
And that is often why sometimes you will see mistakes made in the world
Yeah.
where the machine may learn a completely different set of
Yes.
rules from what you're trying to teach it. But that is the beauty of machine learning. It's not it's not very instructional, if this then that, right?
Yeah.
It is actually trying to learn on its own. But yeah, so in machine learning terms, we set it what we call a goal, which is otherwise known as in scientific term as the target variable.
Yeah.
And that's what it learned.
So what about deep learning? It's also another word that's been thrown around a lot. So what about that?
Exactly. And you've asked, right, the correct question. This is really at the forefront of the technology. You're asking some really cutting edge questions here. So deep learning, the concept of deep learning, or also known as reinforcement learning, sometimes you hear it being referred to as recurrent neural networks. What it is again, it is a subset within machine learning. Yeah. So you're again trying to teach the machine to learn on its own, right? But instead of just giving it one pathway or one way of achieving the goal, you're setting it many different pathways. So it will learn by learning from many different pathways, and then eventually it will learn that this is the fastest or the best pathway to get to its goal. So, put it in layman's term again, let's use our baby example, right? So you had the baby, you give him a reward, i.e. the candy, if he stops crying.
Yes.
What we want to do is give it many examples or ways in which it will in which it will get the reward. So for example, it will learn what it's called good behavior. So good behavior could be things like sharing a toy, passing me the cup, not throwing toys down. So whenever the baby does a good behavior, you will give it the reward. Yeah. And after a while, the baby will learn, or the machine will learn that, good behavior creates results in the reward.
So that's very interesting. We know that kind of technology has been integrated in this asset management business for many years now, right? So, but why are we changing, the way we invest, as you mentioned earlier, from the more traditional way to now kind of integrating, AI, ML into our investment process? Why is that? Can you share with us?
So it's my strong belief, almost an ethos, that we absolutely do need to harness the power of data when we're making investment decisions. And actually, this stems from both a push and a pull factor. So we talk about the push factor first. On the push side, what we're seeing is that the world today, we're seeing an exponential amount of data that is being created, collected and stored, being structured and being analyzed. So without naming names, because I'm under a lot of NDAs, there are funds, and I'm sure you're aware of those. There are funds out there who already do use alternative data, such as drone data. So drones going there to hover around, count the number of cars that are in a supermarket car park, and using that, they will then estimate what the sales numbers look like for this particular supermarket and whether or not the company will beat their sales estimates. And another common example that people use is web scraping data. So we use web scraping to count the number of visitors that go to an e-commerce site. And through that, you're then able to determine if an e-commerce company will beat or miss its earnings. And I mean, I can go on about many more such examples. But one thing's certain, in our industry, we definitely are living in an information age.
Yeah.
And the amount of data that we have is growing exponentially.
Yeah, it's
not going to
massive.
slow
It's
down.
massive. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that sense, the human brains, we have limited capacity, right? So we need to improve our way of evaluating this data. We need to use the traditional way is just not good enough. So that was on the push side, right? And on the pull side, I think there's a good reason why we need to leapfrog traditional quant methods and go directly into machine learning. So what we're seeing in in this space right now is that there's actually a congruence of three key factors. Why it's so important that AI is really coming through as a reality in our generation. So, as you may know, I don't know if you're a reader of sci-fi novels.
Not really, but please.
I was a geek, right?
Yeah,
Remember?
correct. I'm not. I cannot.
So back in 1957, the term artificial intelligence was first coined. And that actually sparked a whole generation of sci-fi writers. You might have heard of Isaac Asimov.
Yes.
Arthur C. Clarke.
I've heard, but I've not read.
Space Odyssey, Robots, The Law of Robots, The Three Law of Robots. These are really famous sci-fi novels that sci-fi writers. Yeah. And I think it's almost like it's a symbiotic relationship. I think the sci-fi sparked the scientists, and then the scientists sparked the sci-fi.
Chicken or egg, right?
Yeah,
chicken or egg.
Exactly. So in the 1960s, 1970s, sci-fi was all about AI. But then it kind of died away in the 1980s. And why is that? Because unfortunately, back then, there were three missing things. One was the availability of data. The second thing was the availability of computing power. And then the third thing was the availability of algorithms or the scientists. They didn't have enough scientists in that field. So, and again, it's also chicken and egg. All three are related. Yeah. So, right now, what we're seeing is that in our reality, in our generation now, we're seeing large amounts of data. Remember, we talk about metaverse, we talk about IoT and stuff like that. So Internet of Things, I mean, we're constantly creating loads of data that's being stored. Indeed. So imagine back in the 1960s, right? They talk about storing data in a matter of bytes with a small b, right? Now, when we talk about our data storage, we're talking about petabytes of data. Right. That's bytes with 15 zeros behind it. Right. I don't know how many billions that is.
Yeah, too much data.
Billions and billions of bytes. And that is the amount of data that you need in order to do something as simple as distinguishing between a dog and a cat. You need about millions of photos of dogs and cats in order to teach a machine to distinguish between a dog and a cat. Yeah. And then the second thing that we need actually is very high and rapid computing power. Yeah. And that actually, thanks to the metaverse guys, the computer gaming geeks. I'm not really a computer gamer, but the computer gaming geeks, they were the ones who had such a strong demand for processing units that NVIDIA released its first GPU, otherwise known as a graphic processing unit, back in 1999. And that has the ability to process data to such a strong extent that it's what we use now as a de facto. GPUs are de facto what we use to process all that amount of data that is required by an AI algorithm. And then thirdly, the thing that really gets me quite excited is how sophisticated AI algorithms have developed since then. Yeah. I don't know if you were born back then.
Maybe I shouldn't reveal my age.
I was around. I remember the Times cover magazine. So I'm revealing my age now. Anyway, so back in 1997, IBM, you may have heard of IBM's Deep Blue. So this was a machine that IBM built back in 1997 that beat the then reigning chess champion, Garry Kasparov, in chess. Yes. That was a landmark win for machines versus men. Because prior to that, chess was considered too complicated a game. Right? Yeah. But then, of course, the critics pointed out, hey, that's just brute force. That's brute force AI. And what we call brute force AI means there's a limited number of permutations, limited number of ways that you can play a game of chess.
Interesting.
And all you need to do is just keep going through all of that and, and you'll be able to beat the human, right? Because the human simply cannot compute and clock the possibilities in as quick a speed as a machine. Yeah. But do you know, even then, Deep Blue, the IBM machine, had to compute about 200 million moves per second, supposedly.
That's wow.
I mean, try beating that icon. And then, on the AI history. So then after that, we had a bit of an AI winter where not much happened. And then I'm getting really excited because then in 2016, we had a massive triumph. And this is when we saw Google came up with AlphaGo, which is a machine learning algorithm that beat Lee Sedol, then the reigning Go champion. And Go is known in Asian cultures as Wei Qi.
Okay.
So it's the one, the one you see that in the Chinese movies. Then it's like black and white.
It's still chess. It's Chinese chess, is
yes,
it? It's probably. I'm not sure.
It's not Chinese chess as in the one with the symbols. It's just black and white.
Okay.
It's the one that the old people play Wei Qi. So you basically need to surround the other color in order to win. So why it was important from an AI perspective was because the number of possible permutations was 4 times as much, like billions of moves, right?
Okay.
And supposedly, I'm quoting a stat here, there were more moves possible than there are atoms in the universe.
Wow.
Really? Wow. Okay. We haven't explored the depths of the universe yet, so I'm not sure that stat is true.
Okay.
Anyway, so and what was interesting was that Google actually trained AlphaGo using deep learning. We're talking about reinforcement learning, right? So it did so by training AlphaGo to play not against humans, but to play against itself. So kept getting AlphaGo to play against itself. Back to my children example of teaching children, right? My kid plays chess, and every time he gets bored, and I said, no, I don't want to play with you. Then he'll just like play against himself. So then after a while, he'll get better because he'll start thinking, when I move, then you think, from the other side, how do I move? And that is true machine learning. Can you see that similarity between how a machine learns and how a child learns a new thing?
Yeah.
So this is quite exciting for me.
I can see the excitement in you. I can feel it.
Yes. So, and then what, for me personally, what has been really exciting in the AI space is something that has developed literally in the last, I think, 5 years.
Okay.
So in 2017 and then again in 2021, I think it was first CMU, so Carnegie Mellon University. And then after that, a China team. They developed machines that can beat humans at Texas Hold'em poker.
Wow.
So I don't know if you play poker.
I do, but very poorly. So machine can definitely beat me. Definitely.
I'm sure that machine can beat
humans
me too.
And machines can beat me.
So it's very interesting because poker, as you know, if you're a poker player, is one of imperfect information.
Yeah.
Each player holds their own cards to themselves.
Yes.
And you have to guess at what the other person's cards might or might not be.
Yes.
You have to guess at whether the other person is lying.
Yes.
So up until now, all the gameplays that we've been looking at, chess, Go, it's on a board game. Everyone sees the information. It's in the economic system, it's perfect information, right? So you know what's happening.
Interesting.
You calculate probabilities. Now you have to calculate probabilities without knowing this information. So this is really exciting for the finance industry because it better approximates the kind of real world problems that we're seeing as finance professionals, where we may or may not know who's buying in the market, what's happening in the market, and with this imperfect information, we have to make the best possible decision. Yeah. So to me, I think it's very exciting that our trading algorithms that we're developing right now is becoming becoming much more sophisticated because we are borrowing such machine learning techniques from the realms of data science, from the realms of artificial intelligence, and we're configuring it to work with our financial data. So I truly believe that fund managers like ourselves who can effectively deploy AI and machine learning in this in their investment approach will thrive in this information age.
I'm convinced. I'm sold. I'm convinced. I mean, all these examples are so interesting, right? You can actually see how this technology is evolving. As you said, learning. And the learning, I guess, very, very quickly. Yes. And, I hear you that we can enhance our investment process with AI and ML. And as you mentioned, the vast amount of data that we have right now is just pretty much insane. I mean, equities, for instance. I mean, a lifetime ago, I was a stockbroker. And, information is like research analyst reports, macro data. There's all sorts of information. And now I guess there's new alternative data, right? So there's so much. And there could be indeed an edge to use technology in these investment strategies today. So it's interesting because you mentioned, this hybrid approach that we're talking about, right? Which is, kind of a sweet spot between, humans, obviously portfolio managers like yourself, and also using machines like ML and AI. So intuitively, to a layman like me, there are they're very competing styles, right? It's like human versus machine, like a war, right? So how do we reconcile this? And can you just tell us more about this hybrid approach?
Yeah, so it's definitely not a war. We want to talk about machines enhancing and augmenting the human capabilities rather than taking over what the humans do. So I start with my basic premise towards investing.
Okay.
So my basic approach towards investing is that investing is both an art and a science. A contradiction of sorts.
Yeah.
You see what I'm getting to?
Like the law degree and the computer science.
Yes. You need to use both your left brain and your right brain, right? And in practice, that means that what we can do is we should leverage that machine capability of being able to process the almost unlimited data that we have, the unlimited data storage and the almost unlimited speed of processing in modern computing. We should leverage that. In other words, I think my ethos is let machines do what they're good at, which is crunching the data, processing the data, even interpreting in simple sense the vast amount of data which is available on any given company. And conversely, what that does for us as humans is that frees up our human brain power to do what machines cannot replicate, which is the creativity, the imagination. Because don't forget, at the end of the day, you still need a human to program the machine.
Correct.
We haven't. I know it's in sci-fi movies, but trust me, we haven't yet reached that stage where machines really are programming themselves. They are learning themselves, but they're not programming themselves.
Humans are supervising this learning process.
Yes. That's why the supervised and supervised learning. Talk about that in a different podcast later. So for example, right, I mean, I remember back when I was an investment banking analyst, one of the first tasks I had was very tedious. It means that I was literally effectively doing data entry. I look at the financial statements of a company, type it into a spreadsheet before we model it, put it into, it's a very tedious task. But today, all these financial statements are already readily available, stored at the SEC website or the MAS website in machine-readable formats. All we have to do is just pull it, download it. It's automatically downloaded and distributed to our databases. We can just use it and comp it. So then leave the humans to think about how better can we code the machine, the model to evaluate it in a smarter way. Yeah, so imagine what a waste of human brain power we were wasting back then, right? And today here at AIOI, we are harnessing the machine learning technology to process and then interpret the raw data that's available on every company that we look at. And we do so not in a traditional quant method. We do so in a way that tries to mimic how a human would logically think about and analyze that data. And that's achievable today only because of all the advances in AI that we were discussing earlier. And I mean, the reason why I say it's augmentation rather than replacement. Think about back in the agricultural revolution that happened, right? Back in the days where the farmer would be there tilling the land, plowing the land, watering the land. Then machines came along. Machines started tilling the land for you. They'll harvest the crop for you. You have automatic sprinklers that sprinkle the crops for you. But does that mean that you don't need a farmer anymore? No, you still have a farmer, but now you freed up the farmer's time to become effectively an estate manager. I can think about planning what crops to plant, how best to optimize, how to improve productivity. And if we didn't have these technological advances, we probably can't support the 7, almost 8 billion humans that we have on this planet today.
Indeed.
Right? Yeah. So, I mean, this hybrid approach that we're talking about, what the idea, the ethos there is to free up fund managers like ourselves, our mental capacity to focus on longer term, broader issues. Issues which I think is almost a 101 of investing. Like, how do we think about the long-term viability of a company? Does its business model make sense? What other investment edge can we pursue? Right? These are things which require imagination, require creativity. Don't worry, humans aren't going to be replaced by anytime soon. Yeah.
So I think that's super interesting. I love our examples. They're super relatable. And I think, it's really, really helpful to our audience as well to better understand, AI and machine learning. And this is only the start, right? So, it's art and science, left brain, right brain, best of both worlds, I would say, right? This hybrid approach. So, it's undeniable the technology will continue playing a critical role in the asset management industry. Tools are being developed, as you said, and these tools are getting smarter smarter and smarter by the second to analyze data sets, reduce costs, mitigate risk, and potentially generate higher alpha for our investors. So thank you so much, Ling, for sharing your perspectives. It's super fun getting to know you as well. And I cannot wait to, have our future episodes. Then we can discuss more in depth about AI and ML in investing. So you guys have been listening to Let's Talk Trends with me, Don Leong. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe to our show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast. Here we are at the end of our episode. Thank you so much again, Ling. Catch you guys next time.
Thank you. Bye.